Hi, welcome back. Let's understand some basics of web services and REST services. As we know, integration means making data transfer between multiple applications is known as integration. We also discussed that by development of web services, either REST services or SOAP services, we can make the integrations. A web service can be defined as it is a program which runs in a server and whose results can be shared among the network to make the integration and to make the data transfer between the applications. The web services are of two types, SOAP and REST. Long ago, at first, we have invented with SOAP services and which are called as very legacy approach since it has limited features compared to the REST APIs. REST APIs are recent one and which provides more features than SOAP services to make the integrations. At first, we are going to deal with REST APIs and later we will work with SOAP services. Nowadays, the development of REST services is 95% and SOAP services is 5%. Still, there are some legacy applications have been running at customers' end, so that still they are sticking with SOAP services. Apart from that, all new integrations and APIs have been built as REST APIs. Before starting with REST API development, we should have some basic knowledge about REST services. First thing, we should know how a REST service can be accessed. Because if we are developing a REST service and providing to the client is going to use this REST API to send the data to the API. Then how that client can able to access our REST API? That is through a URL. Every day we have been interacting with a number of URLs, those which acts as a REST APIs in the backend. If you look at a URL, this looks like https anypoint.mulesoft.com, then Cloud Hub, Console, Home, Applications. This is a REST service. When we hit this REST service, it can able to pull this data and showing in the web page. In similar way, the REST services can be also accessed through the URL. As we know, the domain name is a combination of host:/port. So, a REST API can also be accessed as a URL. The URL contains HTTP protocol, either it can be HTTP or HTTPS, and it should contains host:/port, then base path, then subpath. For an example, we can consider as http://localhost:8081, then customer-sapi/customers. Here we can consider the URL is a combination of base URI and sub URI. We can consider until customer SAPI as base URI and customers as sub URI or resource. We should remember this terminology. Whereas in real time we never expose the host information or port information to the clients. Instead, we expose these APIs as domain names. So if it is of HTTP, it looks like this, and if it is of HTTPS, it looks like this. What else we should know about URL or REST APIs? The REST APIs always should be accessed through HTTP methods. So whenever we call a URL, we should say which type of method it is, whether it is a get based, post based, put based or delete. Because the get of URL will help us or to say us to get something from the backend, and the post is to post something to the backend, and put is to update some resource to the backend, and delete is to delete some resource at the backend. For an instance, if you are registering to Facebook, then you will submit a register page which is of post based REST service. If you are updating some address info or any other habits info, after that it will make a put based call to the backend. If you would like to delete some personal information from the Facebook account, then that will make the delete based request. Now we are good with the HTTP methods and accessing REST APIs through URLs. But the important thing is how we can transfer request data and also how we can get response data over REST request is very important. So assume we have developed a REST service as a Mule flow which allows a customer or user to register to a e-commerce application. So when a user submits a registration page and that request will come to the REST service. Now how the request data which has filled over here will come to the REST API? That is through HTTP request. A HTTP request contains two sections. One is headers section and another is body section. When we wanted to send small amount of data to REST service, we can make use of headers. But when we wanted to send some moderate amount of data to the backend, then we can make use of request body. So whenever a user fills a form and clicks on submit, internally a HTTP request will be created with headers and body, and those will come to the REST service. Then the REST service extracts this input data from request headers and request body and uses in the development flow. Once the REST service processes the request, it will send back response to the front-end user as registration successful. How it will send? While sending back the response also, it will send as HTTP response. The HTTP response also contains response headers. So in this case, the headers will contain status codes and status messages. Also, if you would like to respond back any data, then it should be responded back in the body. For headers, the examples are 200 OK, 400 bad request, 500 server error, extra. So if we say 200 OK means the user will get to know the registration is successful. If we say 400 bad request means the user doesn't send some required fields to the backend. If we say 500 server error, that means something has failed in the backend. So to develop a REST service, we should consider all these areas. Those are, we should identify the HTTP method. We should identify the protocol. We should identify the host. We should identify the port. We should configure the base path. We should configure the subpath. And finally, it will make the URL for us. So we are going to develop a first Mule application as a simple REST service in the next session. And there we will use these details to develop a REST service. That's all about this session. I will see you in next session. Thank you. Happy learning.